After being terribly miscast as a Japanese-influenced Grand Theft Auto clone when originally released on the PlayStation 2 in 2005, Yakuza set the stage for a franchise that would take over a decade to gain a solid footing on Western shores. The Yakuza series found itself finally being praised for innovation meeting old-school mechanics with the prequel to the original game, Yakuza 0. Fans both new and old were off to the figurative races following Yakuza 0, with remakes, remasters, and even brand new continuations enveloping gaming's 8th generation. This rise in newfound popularity allowed the developers Ryuga Gotoku to not only produce sequels to the original games, but also try remaking classics, presenting spin-offs, and most importantly to gamers not living on the Eastern Hemisphere, a chance to play something once confined to its mainland. Being a big fan of the Yakuza and Like a Dragon series of games in their various forms, I steadied my high anticipation for greatness as Like a Dragon Ishin loaded on my PS5. Japan is at a societal, economical, and ethical crossroads in the mid-19th century. It is during the Edo period's tail end that players are given the chance to take control of Sakamoto Ryoma, whose appearance is that of Yakuza series' poster boy, Kazuma Kiryu. A common theme across this game is almost every major character is actually a classical version of the many faces seen throughout the franchise before and after the original Ishin was released in 2014. Ryoma, a disgraced Ronin who returns to his hometown only to be accused of murdering his adoptive father, leaves the place of personal solace in search for the person who was responsible for the killing, a ninja dressed in all black. Traveling to Kyo, the fictional version of Kyoto, under the alias of Saito Hajime, Ryoma's journey for truth aligns him with an army attempting to counter the rising forces of those loyal to the emperor, rather than the shogun force ruling their homeland. It is through these early moments in the narrative that the player is introduced to the numerous qualifications needed to gain 100% completion, including forging dozens of equipment pieces, making it through 40 dungeon-oriented battles of ever-increasing difficulty, and playing every mini-game available that are more numerous compared to what was in the 2014 game. After nearly 90 hours, I finished the main story on normal difficulty as well as all 72 sub-stories and side missions. Somewhat surprisingly, my completion percentage was barely over 40. There's a lot more grinding to be done, including collecting resources in the battle dungeon missions, to craft precious pieces of equipment, help and befriend multiple merchants, including those whose food will fill Ryoma's belly, harvest hundreds of crops alongside Haruka, and dance the night and day away before getting close to attaining a platinum trophy and reaching 100% completion. Following the releases of Like a Dragon that turned the franchise on its head by presenting a turn-based RPG experience, and the duo of Judgment games constructively mastering the gameplay of its 3D brawler-oriented predecessors, Ishin is unique compared to any other game in the series, while also being a step back in the gameplay department from a smoothness perspective. Ryoma has 4 fighting styles that can be switched at almost a moment's notice, with the directional pad when playing with a controller. There's the expected swordsman style that focuses on rather stiff swordplay, with Ryoma usually wielding a katana that is perfect for deflecting incoming attacks and even bullets when the skill tree is upgraded. With guns becoming more prominent in the culture by this time in history, Ryoma also has a firearm and pistol in his arsenal that is associated with the gunman's stance. Like the swordsman style, Ryoma can block strikes with his gun as well, but can't perform parries that knocks back his foes. Ryoma's regular ammo is infinite, but the player can also purchase and craft special, though limited ammunition, featuring different traits like fire, acid, and electricity, though Ryoma can only have one special ammo equipped at a time. Kiryu's punch, kick, grab weapon using brawler style returns here, not being much different than what was seen in the previous iterations, including charge attacks and using a downed opponent to swing enemies into one another. The most interesting addition to the brawler style is the ability to wield special weapons like a cannon. On the opposite end compared to brawler is the wild dancer. Taking notes from the breaker style of the previous games, Ryoma has the ability to gracefully dodge incoming attacks while brandishing his equipped sword for strikes and shooting his pistol to replace what will be associated with the heavy attacks. But the Wild Dancer, being rooted in tactical avoidance, removes the ability to block like other styles. The bone-crushing, downright humiliating at times heat-action maneuvers return, though a little more limited in number compared to some of the more absurd ones that came into existence in games released after the original Ishin. In correlation with the heat gauge and the combat styles, are specific special maneuvers automatically unlocked as the player is introduced to each fighting stance, including using something similar to the Deadeye ability from Red Dead Redemption, when Ryoma burns heat meter while as a gunman, or being in swordsman stance and pulling off a very cinematic dash to cut through a cocky foe. Both extensive and convoluted is the skill tree. Instead of just getting skill points or skill orbs from leveling up, defeating enemies, or playing a particular combat style frequently, Ishin wants the player to break through the limits and grind. Skill orbs are given when Ryoma levels up a combat style by overcoming adversaries when using that stance. But Ryoma gaining personal levels up to level 99, or simply winning certain fights provides training orbs. When placed on the slot on its correlating skill tree shaped like a circle, skill orbs allows Ryoma to permanently learn abilities or gain extra health, heat, and improve the power of that specific style. Training orbs acts as a placeholder where Ryoma unlocks the ability, but the sphere can be removed for use in another style's tree or replaced by a skill orb, thus keeping the training orb for later usage. Once a style reaches level 25 and the player is able to fill up the skill tree with orbs, they have to challenge a dojo master specific to that stance and break the limit while filling in that style's skill tree yet again, not to mention the loss of any training orbs in that tree where the limit was broken. This has to be one of the most tedious ideas of trying to make Ryoma feel that much stronger, especially when players aren't smartened up on how they're both rewarded and punished for trying to make the hero the best he can be. It also must be noted that certain locked skills are tied to particular minigames, side quests, and simply finding them on the ground, called revelations. Finding and reading these revelation books educates the player on what maneuver needs to be performed constantly for a period of time before unlocking that skill, usually in the form of a heat action. Ishin's combat system's most interesting return has to be the class-based trooper cards. About a third into the story, the player is introduced to battle dungeons, a series of 40 sprawling arenas meant to test Ryoma's skills while potentially providing smithing resources. Though presented as soldiers who will join Ryoma on the battlefield inside the dungeon, the truth is these troopers are actually assigned to the 3 slots specific to whatever style is currently in play. These trooper cards present abilities that can be activated either manually or automatically when the meter associated with said cards fills with skills such as producing a wide-range sweeping attack courtesy of modern pro wrestling star turned digital samurai Kenny Omega, or restoring Ryoma's health to full without the use of an item. Like Ryoma and his styles, using these trooper cards allows them to level up and produce better effects when utilized in battle. Players don't have to equip the cards, avoiding becoming an overpowered shatter machine. Even though this is a remake, the issues with combat in games like Yakuza 3 still remain here, including armorless enemies ignoring being struck, Ryoma switching targets in mid-combo, the input delay being detrimental when trying to pull off a perfect parry, and the protagonist taking ridiculously long to get up when knocked off his feet. One of the best things about fighting bosses in the Like a Dragon and Yakuza games is the over-the-top presentation and their transformation after reaching, say, 50% health that would make the player realize they're in for a real fight now. Though there are several boss battles, the transformation is mostly subtle when said enemy emits a red hazy aura and becomes more armored in their ability to take damage. While the original Ishin had plenty for the player to do outside of combat, this iteration expands upon the original concepts while presenting something new as well with the Virtue system. Though different in name, the Virtue system is a redone version of the CP exchange in Yakuza 0, where completing certain tasks a particular amount of times will net Ryoma Virtue points that can be spent to upgrade its stamina, make it easier to gain money and experience points, and speed up the process of farming. Yes, Ryoma has to farm in the traditional sense. Meeting a young woman greatly in debt named Haruka, that sounds and looks just like Haruka from the previous Yakuza games who eventually gets adopted by Kiryu, Ryoma takes it upon himself to help her by plotting out her farmland in the house's backyard, send her out to deliver goods for money, and cook food with ingredients grown, caught in the sea, and bought in various shops around Kyoto. Spending time with Haruka, raising her affection meter, and expanding the farm will create benchmarks where Ryoma has to pay off chunks of Haruka's debt until she is free of the not-so-humorous loan sharks. Though extensive and encouraging to the player to help Haruka, the general acts necessary to make her farm profitable lacks charm or success even when paying off Haruka's final bill, mostly thanks to the rudimentary minigames associated with cooking and farming, essentially making the player just wait out for stuff to grow after planting it, just like in real life. Also underwhelming are the sub-stories and side missions. Being taken from 2014, the minds behind Ishin hadn't found their stride in creating a plethora of memorable side quests from a narrative perspective. Instead of ridding the game of its more mundane and underwhelming sub-stories, they return here with at least 60% of the 72 sub-stories. Seeing Ryoma meet someone, have a conversation, and discover that they only are there to take resources in an effort to build up their friendship meter to the max, a requirement if the player is looking to get that 100% completion. There are dozens of friendships, including a young kid who wants nothing but vegetables, some poor soul getting beaten down and begging for medicine, and a woman who seems to be ready to repay Ryoma with a hot meal. Thankfully, there are some interesting and downright hilarious sub-stories sprinkled in, such as the townspeople becoming captivated by a hypnotic dance, and Ryoma almost being made someone's new lover. Also populating the map are activities to take part in, be it favorites like karaoke, or Ishin-specific additions including chicken racing or feudal gambling. That's a lot more complicated than expected considering the time period. Though the map is smaller than some of the latter RGG games, and doesn't have a lot of buildings to enter, the density of what makes Kyoto a living, breathing city is up to the player to discover and return to until they've gotten everything out of the town, be it ridding the area of criminals, fighting in a battle arena, or dancing with hand fans. Similar to the game's aspects covered so far, the story is a mixed bag. During the mid-19th century, Japan found itself in an isolated period, where trading with the rest of the world due to the rise of the shogun rule was impossible. In the minds of traditionalists and supporters of the emperor, allowing the old ways where the emperor of Japan had all the say would allow Japan to flourish once again. These factors, alongside a caste system on the verge of breaking down, paid executions of important figures behind closed doors, and the influence of Western voyagers put Japan on the brink of societal collapse. In a surprising twist, a low-ranking samurai and loyalist to the emperor named Sakamoto Ryoma had the ability to negotiate peace between the rival mindsets and armies that influenced Japan's societal structure going forward. Instead of being completely faithful to the Japanese history, the developers added their own spin to the adventures of Ryoma and his cohorts, while presenting significant moments in the truest form possible in correlation to the skins of their Yakuza influences. Thankfully, the characters don't reach too far into their digital inspirations for their representation, other than the Goro Majima lookalike Okita Soji. While the fate of Japan's peace and success is a focal point throughout the story, the murder mystery aspect connected to Ryoma's character adds a level of personal drama this fantastical retelling of an actual historical event couldn't provide otherwise. For as strong as the writing and characters are, the pacing is rather rough. Starting slow and setting the stage for something grand is fine, but the story really hits a low point in terms of progression and interest, with long-winded cutscenes and more questions than answers being presented between chapters 3 and 7 of 14. Though those final 5 chapters are some of the best in any Like a Dragon experience. Technically, there were a few frame rate drops usually associated with specific heat actions. Though this is the first Like a Dragon game using the Unreal Engine 4, there are some muddy textures, NPCs oddly popping in and out, and infrequent graphical glitches. The game's biggest technical issue is the camera, especially when fighting inside buildings. Squeezing in when near a wall or not being far enough out to see an incoming strike from an enemy off screen, the camera is frustrating when it shouldn't be, considering how this problem has been mostly fixed during latter RGG games. There's a lot to love about this spin-off, with its biggest flaws mostly existing because of what it really is at heart. A remake of a game made 2 generations ago, where the combat isn't as fluid as what was seen in the Judgment series, the story that takes some time to really get going, and the technical shortcomings are more profound without fully diminishing its overall greatness. Like its predecessors, Ishin proves to be a genre-bending experience, part beat-em-up, part RPG, part party game that proves somewhat overwhelming thanks to the various amount of things the player can do without progressing the story. The busy stuff the player can take part in is beneficial, but initially confusing, mostly thanks to the lacking educating of the player in regards to certain offerings like the blacksmith to craft that precious equipment. Fully immersing oneself in the world of Ishin can bring forth a wealth of different experiences, both negative and positive, including grinding for resources and finding those memorable sub-stories respectively. The overall feeling is nothing short of satisfaction thanks to an epic narrative, more mini-games, and a mostly fun, though aged battle system. Ishin is a must-buy for fans of the franchise who love the old combat prior to Yakuza 5, enjoy Japanese history, and or just wants to race chickens. Gamers who've never played a Like a Dragon experience may find a great starting point with this one, as it has no ties to the previous entries other than the character models. In the end, Ishin is the gaming equivalent of finding that special someone you just don't want to lose, or the boost of adrenaline someone gets having the best time with a group of friends.
もう俺には無理なんだって。頼む。見逃してくれるなら金を払う。だから。
もういい。豚書に連れて行くのも面倒だ。さっさとどこかへ消えろ。
え、いいの？
ぎょうさんおるな。暴れがいがあるってもんやで。手のおしゃべりは真面目にやれ。え？何？なめやがって。